Welcome to this presentation. In this presentation, we're going to cover some examples of how to resolve sentence fragment problems. There's another lecture that I encourage you to watch first, which covers how to identify and does talk to some extent about how to correct a sentence fragments. If after you watch that, you thought to yourself, gosh, this is easy peasy, I already knew all this stuff, then turn me off now. You really don't need to spend any more time on this material. If, however, you still feel a little wobbly and unsure, spending some time with some examples may help solidify your understanding in these areas or demonstrate that you need some more support. And of course, if the second is your situation, come see me and we can go through as many of these as you need to and talk about it in lots of different ways and pulling them apart and putting them back together so that it makes sense to you. Okay, so I'm back in the Aspen book. I am on page 4, and it's actually page 4 in both the 3rd edition and the 4th edition. This is the section that talks about sentence fragments, but it really is just a taste on that topic. It doesn't really dive very far into that. So I've given you another tool. I've posted it, and it's a Chomp Chomp tool. By the way, Chomp Chomp is a really cool, kind of edgy, fun grammar site, and who doesn't think about grammar being edgy? So this is very, very consistent with the whole grammar mentality, of course. Anyway, so this gives you some ideas about how to work with finding and fixing sentence fragments. So this gives you a little bit more depth, and you can see it lists all these lovely words that will affect whether it's a sentence fragment or not. And again, just a little review. I'm not going to spend much time on this, but we need to have 3 things to have a sentence. We need to have a subject. The subject can be implied. That arises when you have a command. Let's say I have a sentence that says, brush your teeth. Well, the implication when I say that is you brush your teeth, but I don't actually say you. But because it's implied, that sentence still does have a subject. So that's the kind of one exception to this rule, that if you don't actually see a subject, but the subject is supposed to be the word you, and the sentence is a command, then that can count as a sentence. Then of course you need a verb. You need a complete verb, not just a part of a verb. And you need a complete thought. And a big interferer with having that complete thought are these words here. And I'm not going to go through all of them, but these words subordinate what might otherwise be an independent clause into a dependent clause. And that's a good start for a sentence, but it's not a complete sentence. Okay, so now we're going to flip and we're going to talk about some sentences, and we're going to try to decide whether they are complete sentences and therefore lovely and perfect and we don't need to worry about them, or whether we need to work on them. And if we do need to work on them, how are we going to work on them? So let's get started. Then I attended Morris Junior High, a junior high that was a bad experience. Well, this is a complete sentence. We have a subject, I, and I'll tell you what, I'm just going to put subjects in yellow, verbs in green, so we can see all those lovely things. And it's a complete idea. Then I attended Morris Junior High. Now let's see if our second sentence is also a sentence. A junior high that was a bad experience. Well, we do have a subject, so we are good to go with that. And we actually do have a verb, but unfortunately it's not the subject of the sentence. We see this word that here. So let's flip back and look. Actually, we'll label our words that potentially cause a problem. We'll put them in pink. Okay. So here we have that is a subordinate conjunction. A junior high that was a bad experience. So while we have a verb here, it's not, it does not make a sentence with our subject. So we're going to have to rewrite this. There are several different ways of doing this. As a general rule, there are 3 ways of fixing a sentence fragment. So we've identified this as a fragment. And one way would be to meld it together with the sentence in front of it. Another strategy would be to meld it together with the sentence after it. And the third would be just to rewrite it as is into a true sentence. We don't have a sentence after, so that's not an option. So we're going to try both approaches. We're going to meld this fragment with the original sentence, and then we're going to try rewriting the fragment into a sentence, a standalone sentence. Okay, well, what this really is an appositive. And you may recall when we were in the comma section that we had something called, I think it was Rule 11, let me confirm that, wherein we were, yes, talking about appositives. And this, when we have a positive, and a positive is a noun that describes the noun that comes before it. And that's what's happening here. We're describing Morris Junior High, and we're saying, what is Morris Junior High like? Well, it's a junior high that was a bad experience. So because it's in a positive, we can't absolutely unite these. And what we would do, because you set off in a positive and a positive with commas, is we would do it like this. Then I attended Morris Junior High, a high school that was a bad experience. And of course, we don't need a comma here at the end because we have terminal punctuation. This is a successful way of writing this sentence. And this is really probably what the author meant. Because this comma, when we say the comma, there's that pause in the sentence. And the person who's writing it interpreted that pause not to be a comma pause, but a period pause. Sometimes people also make it a separate sentence kind of for a dun-dun-dun-dun effect of kind of making it a bigger deal than it otherwise would. It's more dramatic, so to speak. So that can be another reason to do it. But we don't do that in legal writing. It's a much too informal tool. So we're going to go back to our original state. We tried technique 1. As we already said, technique 2 doesn't apply. So now we're going to do technique 3, which is to rewrite this sentence so that it can stand alone. And in this case, all we have to do is remove the word that. I'm also going to change the A to this. This junior high was a bad experience. To say a junior high doesn't logically connect it to the junior high we just named. So that's why I made that change. Now we have a subject, which is yellow, and now we have a verb, which is green. And we have a complete idea. This junior high was a bad experience. So we're good to go. We have accomplished our task. We've solved the problem in 2 different ways. They're both correct ways. You can do it as you think appropriate. You don't feel like you have to do one or the other, or one's better than the other. Let's look at our next set of sentences. He talked for 50 minutes without taking his eyes off his notes. Let's see if it has all the elements we need. He is the subject, and talked is the verb. He talked for 50 minutes without taking his eyes off of his notes. Sounds like it's a complete sentence. It expresses a complete idea, so I'm going to say the first sentence is a real sentence. Now let's look at our next sentence. Like other teachers in that department, he did not encourage students' questions. Okay, well, we do have a subject, he, and we have a verb, did not encourage. Actually, the word not is a adverb, and so I'm actually going to remove that. Let's see if it expresses a complete thought. Like other teachers in that department, he did not encourage students' questions. It does. So we actually have 2 sentences, so we don't have to make any changes. But let me throw a curveball. Let's say this was a little bit different. Let's say this had been how it had been written. He talked for 50 minutes without taking his eyes off of his notes. Like other teachers in that department, he did not encourage students' questions. Well, this is a sentence fragment now. I guess you could say that this seems like it might be a subject, possibly, but we don't have any verb in it, and we certainly don't have a complete idea. So again, we have 2 choices. We can meld this with a sentence that goes before, choice 1. We can unite it with the sentence that comes after, choice number 2, or we could have it a freestanding sentence. We're going to try all 3 approaches. He talked for 50 minutes without taking his eyes off his notes, like other teachers in that department. That's all we needed to do. We've melded them together. Okay, and now we're going to undo what we did before. Now this is an introductory clause, so we do need a comma in front of it. And finally, we're going to make this a freestanding sentence. We need a subject and a verb, so we're going to say he was like other teachers in that department. So this actually isn't going to be our subject after all. He is going to be the subject. And we have was, which is our verb. So again, all 3 of those approaches work. Now, just because they work grammatically doesn't mean that they communicate either in meaning or in style exactly what you want to communicate. In all 3 examples, the way that I united that fragment or made that fragment into a complete sentence subtly changed the meaning and the flow of those sentences. So it's important to pick the approach that's right for you. I just wanted to show you that all 3 will work. Let's go to our next set of sentences. Within each group, a wide range of features to choose from. No, that's not a sentence. Let's see if the next one is a sentence. It was difficult to distinguish between them. Well, it sounds like the subject, and difficult is the verb. It was difficult to choose between them. You know, I can see if you were to say that this isn't a complete thought because we have this pronoun and we're not even sure what we're choosing between. But let's assume, for the sake of argument, that there is an antecedent noun right before that actually make this make sense. And in that case, I would say this is a complete thought. So I'd say our second sentence is okay. We have an infinitive here. Not a car, but a verb. And so that's really what we have going on here. Within each group, a wide range of features to choose from. But we're not saying who is making the choice. We don't have a subject, and we don't, excuse me, we don't have a conjugated verb. So let's see if we can, so we're going to try both approaches. We're going to unite this. We don't have a sentence in front, so we can't do choice A, but we're going to try to merge this sentence with our sentence 2, and we're also going to try to make this a freestanding sentence. Within each group, a wide range of features to choose from. This is a hard one to merge into the other one. I mean, I can do it, but I think I'm going to focus on the other choice, which is to make this a freestanding sentence. I'm going to add there is. Excuse me, there are. Sorry about that. There are a wide range of features to choose from. In this situation, there has become my subject. Now, this is idiomatic in English. If you are a French speaker, you probably are familiar with il y a, which has the same meaning. You don't actually have to have an antecedent for this pronoun. You do need to have it match numbers here. So this is, as you can, actually is correct. Sorry, wrong there. Because it needs to match this one. So really what we're saying is a wide range of features exists or is there. So this is a reflective. So this is really, I guess you could really say this is the subject. But this is idiomatic. You can get away with this, okay? So that's one way of approaching it. So now we have a subject, and we have a verb, and we have a complete idea. Let's just read it to make sure it flows. Within each group, there is a wide range of features to choose from. We can change it up, though, if you don't like to use there is, and I will let you know that while it is grammatically okay to do this, it's not a very elegant solution. It's not a very stylistically pleasing solution. So I have gotten rid of the there is, and now we have within each group, people are able, actually, I'm going to move within each group down here too. Each group. Oops. Okay, people are able to choose from a wide range of features within each group. This change had to do with the misplaced modifier. If you're not familiar with that concept, we will be covering that in a separate presentation. So I don't want to spend time talking about how to fix that or what that's about. So we have our subject people. You could have said you, that's a little bit more informal, or you could refer to a particular person, Bob. People are able to choose. This is our verbal expression. As you can see, a verb doesn't have to be just one word. It can be a whole phrase. People are able to choose from a wide range of features within each group. That is a complete sentence. It was difficult to distinguish between them. This sentence is ambiguous. I'm guessing that the them is features because as we look at this sentence, the only word that is plural is this. Even though it's our only choice, I think it's unclear. So I would rewrite it to say those features or these features. It is difficult to distinguish between those features. Okay, so we have two sentences here. If I wanted to bring these two together, I could do our fanboys approach because we have an independent clause, we put a comma, we put a fanboys. Our second independent clause ends with a period. Or I could use a semicolon. All this is a common Rule 10 scenario. We have an independent clause, closing it off with a semicolon. We have our next sentence, which we close with a period. Okay, let's go on to our next sentence, set of sentences. A few of the less serious fellows would go into a bar for a steak dinner and a few glasses of beer. This is a good sentence. We have a subject. A few of the less serious fellows would go is our verb. And it does express a complete idea. After this meal, they were ready for anything. Our subject here is they. And of course, the they is a few of the less serious fellows. And were is our verb. And this also expresses a complete thought. After this meal, they were ready for anything. So we don't need to make any changes to these two sentences. They are good sentences. It can be really embarrassing to be so emotional. Again, this is idiomatic. The it is okay under these circumstances. Can be really embarrassing. This is our verb. The really is an adverb, so it's actually not part of the verbal phrase. It can be really embarrassing. I guess I need to include to be as well. To be so emotional. So we have all the parts we need, a subject, a verb, and it does express a complete idea. Now we have our next part, especially when you are on your first date. Okay, well, you seem to have a subject here, you, and you definitely have a verb here, are. But the problem is that we have a subordinating conjunction here, when. Let's just go back to our document here, subordinating conjunction right here, when. So that makes this a clause that needs a main clause in order for it to function. One way to fix this is to attach it to the earlier sentence. That's approach 1. Let's look at approach 2. Well, actually, we don't have approach 2 because we don't have a second sentence. Let's look at making this stand alone. We can say, this rule is especially true when you're on your first date, or this concept is especially true when you are on your first date. Now, because the subordinating conjunction subordinates this whole material here, I'm going to put this in italics, we need to have another clause that's going to give us a subject, and it's going to give us a verb. And you have a main clause. It is true that we could have just removed the subordinating conjunction and say, you are on your first date. I mean, that works grammatically. It is absolutely a complete thought. It has a subject, it has a verb, it expresses a complete thought. But when we are reading these two, this sentence and sentence fragment that the author originally wrote, we're really not conveying his idea, right? He wants to connect the really embarrassing emotional thing with the first date, and by you removing especially when, you've now made these two statements appear to be not at all connected with each other. So I would not suggest that. I mean, it's grammatically correct, but it doesn't preserve the meaning of the sentence. Let's go to our next a set of sentences. The first sentence is, the magazine has a reputation for a sophisticated, prestigious, and elite group of readers. Our subject is the magazine. Our verb is has, and it does in fact express a complete idea. So our first sentence is in fact a sentence. Although that is a value judgment and in circumstances not a true premise. Well, we have the that, which is a pronoun. So, and that's kind of referring to this whole idea. So it doesn't have a precise antecedent. So it's not the best choice, but it is a subject, and we have a verb. But our problem is this word although in front, because this is a subordinate conjunction. And so we need to have a main clause for this to work. So we have a sentence before, so we can merge these together. The magazine has a reputation for a sophisticated, prestigious, and elite group of readers, although that is a value judgment and in circumstances not a true premise. I'm going to just, that perspective is a value judgment and in circumstances not a true premise. So we have now solved the problem. It's a super long sentence. I don't really like it, but it's grammatically okay. Okay, let's change it up. We're going to remove the although. Many times removing the subordinating conjunction and capitalizing the first one of the sentence makes the whole thing work. I'm just going to add that perspective. That perspective is a value judgment and in circumstances not a true premise. Let's read them two together. The magazine has a reputation for a sophisticated, prestigious, and elite group of readers. That perspective is a value judgment and in circumstances is not a true premise. Now I'd probably add something like however, because remember we initially had the word although, and so although kind of has the same suggestion in it that you are presenting a different perspective on this. You've presented one perspective and now you're saying, oh, but not quite that, or different than that. I said A, but I really meant B. So that's what we're doing here. So however also signals in that way. Just a little reminder, it's a best practice not to start sentences with however. However is an interruptive, and so we want to have it within the sentence set off with commas. Here's a review of that particular rule. Punctuation, we'll go to the punctuation rules. It's about rule number 5. Oh, it's rule number 6. Set commas, use commas set off interruptive phrases or a transitional expression. The jury, comma, however, comma, voted to acquit the defendant. Okay, so let's go on to the next sentence. In the 7th grade, every young boy goes out for football. Okay, this actually should have a comma because it's an introductory expression, and that goes under rule number 5. So I'm going to add it. Introductory expressions that are under 3 words, and I would say 3 words or under, are okay to omit the comma if you want to, although you can still use them. But this one has four words, so I think that's a miss not to have a comma here. Okay, every young boy is our subject, and goes is the verb. And it does express a complete thought, so the first sentence is a true sentence. To prove to himself and his parents that he is a man. Well, we do have a subject here. We have he. You can probably tell by its placement in the sentence, though, that this is not going to work. And we have a verb, is. But we have this subordinating conjunction right here, the that. And we also have oops, here we go. Did that work? No, yes it did. And we also have to prove our infinitive, which I'm also going to put that in pink. So we need to, so we don't have a complete thought here, and we don't, this whole thing you could consider a subject because we could put a verb at the end of it. It would be kind of awful from a stylistic standpoint, but it could work. But right now we don't have anything other than a subject. But you know what? We can attach it to the sentence that comes immediately before. And literally all we have to do is drop the period. In the 7th grade, every young boy goes out for football to prove to himself and his parents that he is a man. That's a complete sentence. If we wanted to follow the third strategy, which is to make our sentence fragment into a real sentence, we could say, he takes this action to prove to himself and his parents that he is a real man, that he is a man. I'm going to get rid of all of that color. Okay, so now our subject is he and takes this action to prove to himself and his parents that he is a real man. And of course, we could make this he is a real man as its own sentence, although it really wouldn't make sense in the context. So those are 2 ways of solving our sentence fragment problem. Let's go on to our next sentence. She opened the door and let us into her home. This is a complete sentence. Our subject is she. This actually has a compound verb, open, compound predicate, opened the door and let us in. That's fine. The and is what unites the 2. We wouldn't put a comma here, by the way, between these, because while this is an independent clause, on the other side of the fanboys, we don't have an independent clause. So this is punctuated correctly. Let's see about the second sentence. Not realizing at the time that we would never enter that door in her house again. Okay, well, realizing is a participle, and so we don't have a verb. And when we have a verb down here, we would enter. The never is an adverb. And we have the we as a subject. But again, this is part of this subordinating conjunction. Okay, so who is not realizing? I'm going to guess it's she who's not realizing, but it could be us who are not realizing. So but let's work under the assumption that it's her who is not realizing it. Well, since we only actually give her name, not her name, but her identity up here, then we're going to need to move this to the beginning of the sentence. So I'm going to cut this, put it right here. Not realizing at the time that we would never enter that door to her home again, comma, she opened the door and let us into her house. Now, if the people not realizing it were us, then we wouldn't put it here. But now this becomes a clearer statement because we now know the person who's not realizing it is she and not us or somebody else. Okay? So we followed strategy 1. We don't have strategy 2 available to ourselves because we don't have a sentence afterwards. So now let's see if we can make this into a full sentence. I'm going to change it up and say that it's we who were not realizing it. We were not realizing at the time that we would never enter the door to our home again. So our true subject at this time is going to be we, and were and realizing are our verbs. You can see this is a present participle, but now we have married it up with a to-be verb. And so now we do have a complete verb. Realizing by itself is just a participle, but a participle plus a to-be verb gives us a complete verbal phrase. And keep in mind that we're talking present participles, the ones that end ing. We're not talking past participles. Past participle plus a to-be verb does give us a valid verb, but it's a passive voice verb. This is not passive. Okay, so we have, through the second strategy, also created 2 perfectly good sentences. Let's move on to our next one. Making up his mind quickly. Okay, well, we have, again, a participle, but we don't have any subject and we don't have any verb. It's part of a verb, but not a whole verb. Let's go on and look at our second part to see if we have a sentence there. Jim ordered 2 dozen roses for his wife. Well, we do have a full sentence here. We have Jim, he's our subject, and he is taking the action of ordering. Excuse me. Okay, so this is a complete sentence. Okay, well, now that we know what happens next, we kind of know what's going on in this fragment. Making up his mind quickly. Who's making up his mind? Well, it seems likely that it's Jim, right? And so what we could do is we could just put a comma here. And now this phrase is modifying Jim. Who's making up his mind quickly? Well, Jim. Maybe he and his wife had a fight and he's decided, I'm going to make this right. I quickly made up my mind. I'm calling and ordering some roses for my wife. That could be one scenario. So that's one way of fixing this sentence, by merging it with the sentence that follows, strategy 2. But let's also try this, the third strategy, which is making this its own sentence. Jim made up his mind quickly. So now we have green for Jim. And here we go. Jim made up his mind quickly. That is a complete sentence. Let's read the whole thing. Jim made up his mind quickly. Jim ordered 2 dozen roses for his wife. So again, either one of those strategies will solve the problem of the fragment. Now let's do the last set of sentences. With my brother standing by my side, I reached for the pot handle. Okay, well, our subject is I. And the verb is reached. Let's see if it's a complete thought. With my brother standing by my side, I reached for the pot handle. Sounds like a complete thought to me. Tilting the pot way too much caused the boiling water to spill. This is I should have marked this one, I did not. Our issue is we don't have a complete verb here. Tilting is a participle. Okay, so I'm going to put that in pink so we can keep track of it. Okay, it sounds like probably I'm the one who's doing the tilting, right, in this story. So if we're going to keep it as this participial phrase, we're going to have to put it next to I. But that gets to be hard because we already have this introductory clause. So we could do this, but gosh, when you see it, you're going to be appalled. I'm just going to do it so you can see how awful this really, truly is. With my brother standing by my side, tilting the pot way too much caused the boiling water to spill, causing the, we have changed this to causing. Okay, with my brother standing by my side, tilting the pot way too much, causing the boiling water to spill, I reached for the pot handle. Actually, that doesn't work because now we don't have it in chronological order. So I'm just going to have to give up on that option. That's a train wreck. We are going to, I'm going to add my subject, which again I think is I. I tilted the pot way too much, causing it to spill. I can add the word then tilted if I think it's necessary to put it in order. And if, of course, if I want to combine these, I can combine them because they're two independent clauses now with a semicolon, or I could put a comma and a fanboys there if I want to. But I'm going to keep them as two sentences. With my brother standing by my side, I reached for the pot handle. I then tilted the pot way too much, which caused the boiling water to spill, or causing the boiling water to spill. Okay, so this is just an overview of how to approach these. If you still remain a little bit uncertain how to approach these, I encourage you to continue to work on these. Come see me. We'll go through lots of examples. I mean, literally there are thousands of these on the internet we can play around with so you could develop a lot of confidence. It can be, in some situations, kind of like practicing music. You know, when you were maybe in junior high school and you were learning to play the violin or the flute or the tuba or whatever, you did scales. And the first time you did the scale, it sounded awful, wasn't very good at all. But the repetition, the doing it again and again, can cause it to snap, and then you see the pattern on a deeper level. So that can be helpful in this situation. So if you'd like to come by and we can work on them together, I'll be delighted to see you. Thank you for your attention. Have a wonderful day.